Have you ever read a Bible story so strange it left you scratching your head? A prophet who calls down bears to maul children. A general who halts the sun and moon in mid-sky. A race of giants roaming the earth before the Great Flood. Are these just flights of fancy, or do they conceal fragments of a shocking reality? Today, we're diving deep into 3 of the Bible's strangest stories. Our first tale takes us back to 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 23. Imagine this. The young prophet Elisha is walking through the town of Bethel when a gang of local youths begins harassing him. They taunt him, calling him, "Go up, bald head, go up," likely mocking one of Elijah's famous acts of ascension. Elisha turns around, spots the jeering gang, and utters a simple curse. "I call the bears upon you!" And suddenly, to everyone's shock, 2 bears appear and proceed to maul 42 of the youths. That's a pretty brutal response. At first glance, the story seems bizarre, even cruel. Why would God allow such fierce animals to attack defenseless children? As always, context is key. The Hebrew word na'ar can mean young men, not just children, and the action is set in Bethel, a place notorious for idol worship and home to a large Canaanite cult at the time. We're talking about a nation known for child sacrifice, not exactly a hotbed of Sunday school classes. Furthermore, the verb call doesn't necessarily mean Elisha summoned the bears magically. It might suggest he simply directed his curse towards them. So instead of picturing innocent kids being mauled by teddy bears, imagine Elisha facing down a pack of violent young cultists, some of whom might be armed. The bears coming down the mountain could symbolize a sudden attack by a wild animal, something Elisha warned the group he'd face if they continued their harassment. In this light, the story takes on a whole new meaning. It's no longer Elisha using superpowers to punish children for name-calling. Instead, it portrays a prophet defending himself against a hostile mob using whatever means necessary. Elisha, like many prophets, had a fiery temper. He was known to curse and even invoke God's judgment in anger. Think back to his confrontation with Hazael, another prophetic figure who prophesied the death of his friend, Elisha cursing him, "Let leprosy stick to you and to your seed." This wasn't a cute, "you're going to lose your eyebrows and nose" kind of leprosy. Leprosy was a fate worse than death in ancient Israel, causing disfigurement and social banishment. So what lessons can we learn from this story? When judging actions in the Bible, we must consider the full context. Hostility in ancient cultures ran high, and Elisha could reasonably fear for his safety. He faced threats from kings, cults, and false prophets throughout his ministry. Prophets were frequently harassed, attacked, or even killed in the line of duty. Elisha and other prophets often lived among hostile populations. Their message, which usually involved exposing idolatry and demanding reforms, did not always go over well. The people of Bethel were deeply entrenched in Canaanite religion, which viewed pagan deities as superior to Yahweh. Elisha's challenge to their beliefs put him in their crosshairs. As for the bears, they symbolized the dangers of the wilderness, a place apart from civilization where life was harsh and wild. Animals roamed. The bears represent both physical threats and the untamed aspects of nature. The story warns against provoking prophets and reminds us that godly figures faced real-world challenges, not just spiritual ones. It also highlights the importance of respecting those who speak God's word, as antagonizing them could bring unexpected consequences. But our journey through bizarre biblical tales doesn't end there. Up next, we'll tackle Joshua and the sun and moon. The Israelites under Joshua's leadership are locked in a fierce battle against the Amori tribes in the plains of Beth Horon. Joshua has been commanding the troops since dawn, and the fight rages late into the afternoon. Just when things seem most desperate, Joshua calls out to the sky and the earth stops. For a miraculous 12 hours, the sun pauses in its journey across the heavens, and the moon halts its cycle. With this extra time, the Israelites win the battle, defeating the Canaanites and laying waste to their cities. Sounds like the plot of an epic fantasy novel, right? Well, If you're thinking that this story defies all logic and science, you're not alone. At first glance, the account in Joshua 10 verse 12-14 appears to defy the laws of physics. How could the sun and moon, celestial bodies governed by the laws of nature, simply stop on command? Modern science confirms that such a feat is literally impossible. And indeed, when translated more literally, the Hebrew text reveals the full extent of the cosmic pause. The exact words spoken by Joshua are, "Sun, stand still on Gibeon. You, O moon, in the valley of Ajalon." But does this passage really mean the sun and moon physically halted in the sky? A closer look at the original language suggests there's more to the story than meets the eye. The phrase, "sun, stand still," can also be rendered as, "Be silent, sun," while moon in the valley of Ajalon might mean, "Moon, stay dark over Ajalon." Joshua may not have been halting celestial bodies, but calling on the forces of darkness to shroud the area in darkness and silence. This interpretation aligns with the broader literary context. The book of Joshua is framed as an epic poem recounting Israel's conquest of Canaan. Poetic license and hyperbole are common throughout the narrative. Think back to the Song of Deborah in chapter 5, where Sisera, the commander of the Canaanite army, is described as having 900 chariots. Such numbers aren't meant to be taken literally, but serve to emphasize the vastness of the oppressive Canaanite military force. Similarly, the account of Joshua commanding the sun and moon might be less about celestial mechanics and more about poetic expression. Ancient Near Eastern literature is filled with examples of deities and heroes controlling the weather and natural phenomena. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero Enkidu commands the sun god Shamash to halt as he journeys to the underworld. However, such feats were typically accomplished through divine power or supernatural abilities, not mere commands. It's possible that the author of Joshua uses similar literary devices, imbuing Joshua with heightened abilities for dramatic effect. If this is the case, the story doesn't aim to present a scientifically accurate account of a cosmic standstill, but rather uses poetic exaggeration to glorify God's power over the forces of nature and emphasize the magnitude of Israel's victory. And now we come to the final tale of our Biblical Oddities series, the story of the Nephilim. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, we find this puzzling statement. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Giants were they of the old, men of renown. At first reading, the passage seems to imply that the offspring of divine beings and human women roamed the earth before the Great Flood, a notion that aligns with popular notions of giants existing in pre-flood times. Adding to the mystery, the same term Nephilim appears again in Numbers 13, verse 33, describing the Israelites' spies encountering giants, the Rephaim, in Canaan. Were these enigmatic beings a separate race or perhaps different individuals? What exactly were the Nephilim and how did they fit into the biblical narrative? Most scholars agree that the Nephilim were real, but their exact nature and identity remains a topic of debate. The passage in Genesis 6 offers cryptic details, leaving room for multiple interpretations. Let's start with the literal view. Some believe that the Nephilim were the offspring of fallen angels who mated with human women, producing giant, evil children. This idea finds support in ancient Jewish texts, like the Book of Enoch, which elaborates on the misdeeds of fallen angels and their unions with humans. According to these accounts, angels led by Azazel commingled with humans, causing widespread corruption and wickedness. Some scholars argue that the Nephilim represent fallen angel offspring, born from a forbidden union that corrupted humanity. Other scholars disagree, proposing a different explanation. In this view, the sons of God mentioned in Genesis weren't fallen angels, but rather righteous descendants of Adam and Eve, specifically Seth, the third in line after Adam and Eve. After Cain killed his brother Abel, Adam and Eve feared for their safety and had their third son, Seth. whom they believed was more godly than his violent older brothers Cain and Jubal. Over time, Seth's descendants, known as the Sethites, intermixed with the descendants of Cain, resulting in offspring who engaged in wickedness, including the Nephilim. This interpretation emphasizes the mixing of good and evil bloodlines, leading to a sinful race of giants. Yet another perspective identifies the Nephilim as the offspring of fallen angels. The term sons of God refers to the offspring of Seth, who interacted with the giants who were the descendants of Anak. The Nephilim were thus the product of a mixed ancestry that resulted in these fearsome creatures. While none of these theories can be definitively proven, the last view holds particular significance. The Nephilim are identified as the offspring of King Anak, a prominent figure in the biblical narrative, suggesting that the giants may have been powerful kings or warrior chieftains. The description of the Nephilim as men of renown implies that they were well-known rulers or leaders. Considering the brutality and lawlessness prevalent in the ancient world, it's plausible that these giants were ruthless tyrants or warlords who preyed on the weak. If seen through this lens, the Nephilim symbolize the oppressive forces that plagued the pre-flood world, highlighting the rampant corruption and violence that eventually led to the catastrophic flood sent by God to cleanse the earth. In the end, the truth behind the Nephilim remains shrouded in mystery. However, these enigmatic beings offer a profound lesson in interpreting biblical accounts. History and myth often intertwine, making it challenging to discern fact from fiction. While some elements of the Nephilim story might have roots in historical reality, the inclusion of supernatural beings complicates matters. To truly understand such narratives, we must consider the cultural, historical, and literary contexts in which they were written. Ultimately, grappling with the enigma of the Nephilim deepens our understanding of the complexities inherent in interpreting ancient texts. It reminds us that faith and reason are not mutually exclusive, and that exploring the boundaries of belief can lead to profound insights. So what do you think? Do you believe the Nephilim were real? Did Joshua witness a meteor storm? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you love diving into these fascinating biblical mysteries, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. We've got more amazing content coming your way. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the Bible's hidden meanings. Until next time, stay curious, keep asking questions, and remember, the journey of discovery never ends.